I try to put in not only the tech parts, not only the smart city buzzword bingo, but also give a bit of context. So where are we coming from? Why are we talking about this? Why is this somehow important to all of us? 4 chapters. The first one is going to be cities in a nutshell. That's like a brief introduction to the concept of cities in general. Second one is going to be growth and problems. So how did we end up in this situation in which we are now? Smart city approach, that's actually the part where I do the buzzword bingo. And then to-dos is more like the call to action, and just everybody leaves motivated, and yeah, let's see if that works. So, cities in a nutshell. You actually obviously know what a city is, but do you really? The technical definition for a city is actually a dense, permanent human settlement. Cities have been around for approximately 12,000 years by now. So the first city, 10,000 before Christ, was actually Jericho. Why did people come up with the idea of, like, let's live in a city? Of course they didn't, but they invented agriculture, farming, and selective breeding, and they realized I don't have to be a hunter-gatherer all the time. I can also, like, stay in a place and grow my stuff. And of course that is way more efficient than running around and picking food all day long, or hunting, whatever, sheep. Probably not sheep, but yeah, you get the point. So they actually, they settled, not permanently, but like way more permanent than before. They stayed for half a year, for example, and quickly actually realized if we do selective breeding, if we do farming, we have like a surplus of food, right? So that means people have time on their hands suddenly, because not everyone is actually working for the food all day long, but some people produce food and they have more of it, so then give it to the others, and they have free time on their hands to do something else. Division of labor, that's an important part of how cities became the thriving and exciting places that we're living in today. Because the division of labor enabled people to start crafting stuff, producing things besides food. They could do trade. And that is something we obviously are all very, very much into. Like the early Amazon Prime already worked without digital technology, I guess. So like trade is something that keeps us together. And trade actually led to a lot of people moving into these new concepts of cities or like settlements. And that's actually how it all started. That is Tellez Sultan, also known as Tel Jericho or Ancient Jericho. It's actually in the West Bank in Palestine, 2 kilometers north of the center of Jericho today. And that is this first settlement we know of. Maybe there's older ones, but that one is approximately 10,000 before Christ, so 12,000 years old. It's been called the oldest town in the world. Of course, the concept of a town and a city was different back then, but it was the first permanent settlement that we actually know of. 10,000 before Christ, there were 2 million people on the planet. That's like a quarter of Switzerland globally. So the cities were a bit smaller. Today we have more than 550 cities worldwide which have more than 1 million inhabitants, and more than 80 cities with more than 5 million people in it. Tokyo being the largest, 37.5 million people in the metropolitan area of Tokyo. So 4.5 times Switzerland in one city. So for the first 11,000 years, development was quite slow. There was not much going on. But then in the second half of the 18th century, around 1760 approximately, there was this thing called Industrial Revolution. That is when we came up with machines and steam and water power. And we invented new chemical manufacturing methods and mechanized factory systems and used machine tools. And we got way more productive than we've been before. Another explosion of productivity. Agricultural revolution, a lot of food. Industrial revolution, a lot of everything suddenly. So with that came an unprecedented rise in the rate of population growth, migration, expansion of cities. And that's generally what we talk about when we say urbanization. It's people moving to the cities because they're like drawn into it, because they want to get a piece of the cake, basically. In 1801, in England, the proportion of the population living in cities was 17%. So 17% of all people in England, in Britain, I'm sorry, in 1801 lived in cities. By 1891, so within 90 years, that number has grown to 72%. And you can imagine what that does to the infrastructure of a city. It's just an explosion of people. That's probably one reason why middle class average life expectancy was around 45 back then. Workmen, laborers, more like 25. That's when you died back then. That got better. Britain's current life expectancy is, I think, 80 and rising, so we're fine now. What else are cities than just like these dense human settlements? Networks. Networks that we all actually profit from, that we enjoy a lot. We are social animals, we like to mingle, we like to interact. What it created, or what it let thrive, is the cultural part. Using tools, cooking, clothing, that is part of culture, right? And then later, the fancy stuff came up, like art and music and theater and dance and rituals, right? Networks of economy, of course. Production, distribution, trade, but also consumption of goods by different agents. We actually enjoy that. We do. We're good at it. That's why capitalism is so successful. If it is successful, to be discussed, but it is successful. Politics. The word politics stems from a Greek word, and the Greek word means affairs of the city. Religion. It's about, gatherings. It's about rituals. It's about stories. It helps a lot if you don't have to travel for 10 hours to be in church on Sunday, so you maybe move to the place where the other believers are, the other faith, the people of your faith. And then, of course, social life. We like to mingle, we like to interact, communicate. We need to find partners and reproduce, or have fun if we don't want to reproduce. The chances of meeting the right person in the city is way bigger than in the outback, actually. So that all draws people into the city, and that's why cities are such a successful thing today. On top of all that, cities are also symbols of human communities, of interaction, and of creativity. I mean, that's what's so exciting about them. We're all together here, everything, like, culture is exploding, everything is available within like short distances, and it's just, every day is new. And we're used to it and bored at the same time, and then we binge watch Netflix. But if we take a look at it and realize how much happened, or how much needs to happen to make that possible, it's just actually quite an exciting thing. Part 2, growth and problems. This is how things are today. Remember, 2 million people, 10,000 before Christ. In 1800, we had 1 billion people on the planet. 1927, we had 2 billion. That's a quick rate of growth already. But then, of course, exponential growth happens. Life expectancy goes up. The chances of finding the right partner, to be politically correct, are growing. And so, more children, more people. 1984, we crossed the 5 million. And by today, we're 7.9 billion. 55% of these 7.9 billion people live in cities or suburbs of cities. So more than half of us, or 4.35 billion approximately, live in cities today. Let's jump to 2050. These numbers will be a bit different, given that pandemics can be controlled and climate change doesn't all fuck us up early, pardon my French, but we're going to be 10 billion by then. That's actually the estimates. We're going to be 10 billion people on the planet. We're not going to have 55% of these people living in cities. We're going to have 68% of these people living in cities by then. I mean, of course, that's estimates based on models of growth and on historical data, and that's what's probably going to happen, around 70% in cities. That means we're going to have 6.8 billion people in the cities then. 2.5 billion more than today in 29 years. That is actually 300 new New York cities within 29 years. Or 10 new New Yorks every year, or 240,000 people every day moving to a city for the next 29 years. That gives you an idea about how hard this growth challenge is. Back in 2021, today, the 4.35 in cities today already consume 78% of all the energy produced. We in the cities produce 60% of all greenhouse gases by today. So now imagine what happens if we have 2.5 billion people more only in the cities consuming resources, producing GHGs, and asking for mobility, healthcare, internet, food supply, electricity, water supply, logistics, public service, waste collection, parking spaces, heating, sanitation, clean air. I'm going to stop here. It is hugely complex to run a city properly. The fact that we all have energy and internet and everything is running well and the water is drinkable, it's not a given. So what happens if 2.5 billion people move into these cities? What does it do to the SDGs, to the Sustainable Development Goals, for example, that we need to hit? What does it do to cities which are already today full and smoggy and stressed and run on infrastructures decades and like some of them centuries old? Water leakage in Great Britain. Every day, 1,200 pools of fresh water are lost in Great Britain due to water leakage because the pipes are leaking. 1.2 thousand Olympic pools of fresh water. London is in real danger of water scarcity. London. Good old climate change will cause more of these extremely uncomfortable problems for us. Not only in places where we here in rich and cozy Switzerland like talk of as remote and developing spaces or places or what, but like around the corner. First of all, I want to give you an idea about the problems, the challenges, some of them. Okay, heat islands. Maybe you have heard of it. Heat islands are actually nothing more than streets and buildings warming up when the sun shines. What that does, it stores energy. You know, like wearing black on a sunny day, it's hot. You have a black car, very, very hot inside, and it stores the energy. That's what the streets do. That's what the buildings do. They store energy. So climate change will like make temperatures rise. There's going to be more hot days. There's going to be more hot nights. And the thing is that by these added energy, the added heat that actually is removed from the streets again, or like evaporates from the streets, physically not correct, but you get the point, that actually takes away the chance of cooling down during the night. And that's what our bodies need. And that like will put physical stress on us that's horrible. 2003, there was a heat wave in Europe. I don't know if you remember that. But we had 70,000 people dying of heat. 15,000 people in France died of heat. Floodings, like the flood in Germany this year, there was dead people, 10 billion euros of damage, and 2.5 billion of them insured, by the way. So $7.5 billion euros taken away from people's pockets. Air pollution, yeah, smog. Air pollution kills an estimated 7 million people a year. Every year, 7 million dead people because of smog and pollution. And with 2.5 billion people more who all want to have a car and run their air conditioning and heat their houses, it's going to be dirtier. Diseases, Anopheles, the tiger mosquito, the funny things that used to live in Africa, they're around the corner. And with them comes dengue and malaria. Water scarcity, as said, is going to be a problem too, due to heat, like increased heat. But also the infrastructure is going to like suffer a lot. With that comes a problem with food production, because food production needs water. 2.5 billion people more need more food, so we need more water, but we have less. The IPCC AR6 report of the International Panel on Climate Change that just came out, the first part of it, is actually quite clear. We need to hit this 1.5 goal somehow. Still very questionable if we make it, but we have to try. So no matter if you love your SUV or your cargo bike more, we're all in this together. And that's the point, especially in cities, by the way. Not only because most of them are built where? Right, next to the sea. Because ports and ships, that's what we did trade on. So the cities are all next to the water, and that's rising. 45% is the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that we need to cut in this decade alone to reach the 1.5 degrees goal. 45% of all greenhouse gas emissions cut down while we are growing at a rate that gives us 2.5 billion people more in 29 years. Way more people who have to live way more sustainable lives. Part 3. That's where I like leave out all the other stuff we need to do, because we could talk all night long about that in the next 14 years probably, but I'll try to just give you an idea about what the tech and data part can contribute in order to tackle some of these problems. So smart cities. In order to tackle the immense challenges we had, we need to utilize all options we have. Data sets can help make sense of things. Modern machines and algorithms can help find patterns and huge sets of data we were never able to cope with, and produce like new approaches that we can use to be more efficient and more, well, sustainable in the end. And that's what the concept of smart city is built upon. Tech-based analysis, optimization, and the consolidation of resources. At least that's what I think a smart city should be defined as. There is no official definition for what a smart city is, but this could be one. I recently asked someone who should know, the ex-CIO of Palo Alto, Silicon Valley, Jonathan Reichenthal, who is like one of the leading authorities on smart cities, and that's his definition of smart cities.
The challenge with the term smart city is that as I talk to city leaders all over the world, no one agrees on a definition. And I suppose in a way that's a good thing because we can be creative and we can adopt its meaning relative to the community. But it also means it's much harder to measure and to be very specific about what it is we're referring to. Ultimately, what we do find out is that city leaders are talking about how do we improve the quality of life for our communities? How do we make it better in terms of livability, workability, and sustainability? And can we bring new ideas to the table? Can we leverage innovation? Can that be driven by existing technologies and new technologies? And the answer, of course, is yes, because we're seeing all these incredible solutions around the world, sometimes using existing technology to deliver something completely new. Or a new technology comes about, like the Internet of Things, and we can now put sensors into our environment, and it gives us a whole range of new capabilities for detecting air quality or leaks in our piping systems. Even though we may not have this definition, if we keep focused on people and we realize this is about new ideas in the 21st century for better communities, I think that's going to be how we think about smarter and more sustainable communities.
Great, some more product placement. Schaefer Hansen, I didn't even introduce myself. Christian, I have a company, I do this stuff day in and day out. So I like his definition. He's a tech guy. And he turned into a public servant guy. Like the city of Palo Alto approached him and asked him, would you consider being our CIO and help us digitalize the city? And he said, after considering it for a while, I may try this. And it changed him. And he's a really good, like by now he's an advocate for this like more purpose-driven approach to smart cities. So the tech is not the important part, but it's about the people living in it. And that is actually a very, very important distinction when it comes to, I mean, that's why smart city as a topic is so annoying, because it's mostly about boring technology and everybody's like, well, what's that going to do with my life? While there's no exact definition of smart cities, there is actually some crucial stuff people agree on when they talk about it. For example, that smart cities tend to be compartmented into 6 areas, which are people, government, mobility, the economy, the environment/energy, and living. This is the so-called smart city wheel. A guy called Boyd Cohen came up with that like years ago, and he's a climate strategist and an urban developer. And he came up with this wheel, starting with the inner layer of infrastructures and data, which is the basis of everything. And then you have these 6 areas around here, subdivided into different areas like research and development intensity and smart people, or resource management and environmental part, or the online services and smart government. You get an idea about what sectors are actually or can be driven by data and technology. It's actually most or all of them. People is about educational opportunity. That's non-exclusive list, right? That's to give you an idea, a broad one. Educational opportunities for all. How do we learn? With the help of data and technology. Participatory and social inclusion. How will our democracy survive 2.5 billion more people? Like, how do we include people into this hugely growing society and communities? Creative resources to develop a community of solidarity. We need to find a way to live together under these stressful circumstances, having 30% more people than today, or 25, in 29 years. I mean, that's gonna be a problem. The cities will mostly grow in the developing world, because that's where growth happens, actually. But we're gonna be put under stress as well here, of course. Second, government. That is, of course, easy access to the services of a city or a municipal administration. If you move, you don't have to go there and sign 48 papers and wait for half a day. You can just type it in and send it, and it's fine. And you get a letter and it's gone, it's done, and it works. The provision of IT infrastructure. This stuff has to run on something, right? The cables. We need the cables. So that has to be organized. The grid has to be coordinated. People have to take care of it. And it needs to improve and get better and quicker and faster and all that. Control of municipal admin processes. Well, that's more the internal part. Like, how can you make public service more efficient internally. Mobility, clean and safe mobility. Mobility is actually one of the biggest issues we're having. One of the biggest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions and to energy consumption. So efficient traffic and transport solutions are key to our preparation for a less problematic future, let's put it that way. Tech can help there. Mobility sharing, of course, not everybody owning a car is already a good start, even though there's discussions about, is this really helping to make traffic less dense? What's clear is that if people share cars, not everybody has a car anymore. And that is, like, resources-wise, production of cars, energy intensive, like a lot of steel you need to produce and use. So that is actually helping. And then modes of transport, optimized coordination of these different modes of transport people are coming up with. Shared mobility, you have the trottinettes, you have the city bikes, the e-bikes, you have public transport, how we all knew it. Then you have shared cars, and you have like all these different things that are basically mostly inventions of companies, so they actually have their little ecosystem around them. But if we want to really move from individualized traffic to shared mobility, nobody wants 11 apps and 14 accounts and 300 registrations. I wanted like just push a button and that's it, and I can use everything. So why is there nothing like that? It's very complicated to do that. Basel, Germany, France. Where do you pay the taxes for the car you rent if you drive with a shared car from Switzerland to France? Economy. Innovative and open economic system. Of course, the digitalization changed work culture. I mean, remote office wasn't possible before. That was called unemployment. We can work from wherever we are. We have these collaborative platforms, Slack and all that stuff. And it's so easy by now. Circularity, that's a very important part. Like, how do we use resources in a cleverer way than before? Because by now we just produce concrete, put it in a building, and then throw it away on a dump, which is, well, not very clever, considering how much energy goes in there. I don't know if you know, but if concrete production was a country, it would be the third biggest country after the US and China when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions. Like almost 10% of all CO2 emitted by us humans is actually coming from concrete production. Imagine 2.5 billion people needed housing. Facilitation, understanding how digital work and collaboration are different from the analog world somehow, the traditional way of working, and facilitating another buzzword, the different silos. But it's true. I mean, like, public service works different than the private sector does, and science works different than them. So you have to somehow put these people together to create clever solutions in these hugely complex challenges. And that needs to be facilitated. Somebody has to like take care of it. It's a project therapeutic is what I'm calling it. And networking, of course. It's the basis of defining problems properly, analyzing then the solutions we're having, and then optimizing them if possible. Environment and energy, we have more sustainable urban development. We need to find ways to live smarter. We all want more space and fancier flats and all that, it's fine, but like with all these people and the need to reduce the usage of resources, we need to find more intelligent ways of living. We need to size down a bit. But we also have to transform the building sector, because the construction sector is a huge contributor. Like cement is already 10%, and then all the energy, all the gray greenhouse gases, the gray energy, that's a huge problem. Renewable energies, smart grids. Traditionally, there was one source of energy production that threw out the energy into the grid. That's all changing. We have PV by now, we have water power, we have all these different sources. That means decentralized energy production. The energy amount that goes into the grid is suddenly a complete chaos. That's not one contributor, but like hundreds of thousands of them. How do you manage that grid? Tech helps do that. And the inward settlement development, what a beautiful word. So transformation areas. We have some of these in Basel. It's actually old industrial sites that are unused or logistic places, and you turn them into like livable areas. And you try to make that in a smart way, more sustainable, short distances, and needs to be more sustainable even though there's more people, and the needs won't really change a lot. And then architecture has to contribute to that to create more livable and long-lived places. And then smart living. That's providing healthy, safe, barrier-free and communal surroundings. Just like create spaces where you want to live, where you like have the feeling of my life is okay. They become more and more important. Inclusion. There's already by now tech that helps include people with disabilities, for example. And that is a thing that we need to move on with and get better at. Fostering social exchange and neighborly help. The community of solidarity from earlier. That's what this is about. Of course, tech and digital communication can help do that as well. I don't know if you know this Basel group that the Bonjour magazine came up with when the pandemic started. This Gern Geschehen is a platform, like, there was 20,000 people on it suddenly, and they all like just started giving shit away to each other and helping each other out and all that. Tech-based, fantastic. It's still Facebook, nobody wants that, but it worked well. Okay, some examples. Democracyled Basel. It's very selfishly, it's a project that we just launched. It's going to be over a period of 3 years, we're going to try to develop 10 concrete reform approaches for a modern and inclusive democracy with more citizen participation. It's about trying different techniques of how can we include people into the democratic process. I mean, Switzerland is already good at it, but still, improvement is possible. So what we're going to test is, for example, fuzzy voting. That's a non-binary voting process. You don't say yes or no anymore, but you have a scale of 1 to 10. And you can say, how much am I for it, how much am I against it? And that gives a better image of how the acceptance of a measure is in the society, for example. We don't know if that really helps, but we're going to try, and we're going to check out if it works and what it does. Smart vote, you know probably Smart vote gives you a grid of your political position. And we're going to try to make that possible for referendums based on digital tech. We'll have a citizen budget, for example, which is basically giving away money from the state to a community of people, and they decide what to do with it in a democratic process. So like low-level budgeting, actually. So you and your neighbors can decide on, do we build a bench with it, or do we, whatever, buy the neighbor's car and burn it? And an online platform that actually allows citizens to submit parliamentary initiatives in a realistic setting. eTaxes. Since February 1st, 2021, you can actually do your taxes online. You do not have to print out anything anymore. That's fantastic. That was a difficult thing to achieve, reforming the whole internal process in the tax department, basically. So it's digitally available, and you can track and transfer stuff. Mobility, I told you about it. It's called mobility as a service. Implementing intermodal kinds of mobility into one app or one ecosystem. But the basic idea is you have your phone, you have one app, and it spits out a ticket that's valid all day for all the transport you need. Or it even just checks, okay, he just uses a scooter and it bills you later. Many problems less, and you can move freely on all shared mobility devices that you can find and public transport. There's different levels of implementation, and the best one so far, tested in Basel, is called YouMove. It implemented tram, bus, train, bike, e-bike, trotties, cars into a directly bookable and combinable app, more customer-oriented and like away from this, I need to own a car to get somewhere. It simplified the intermodal travel. Economy, digital tools that actually, based on big data, find out suspicious transactions, for example. I mean, finance now runs on microseconds, like the exchange is so quick, no human being can grab that, but tech can. And so that is how they actually leverage the corruption problem a bit. This is a project we started in 2019. It's called Smart Climate. And the idea was to install a network of now 160 plus sensors in the international region here, the metropolitan area, how you call it. So it's in France, Germany, and mostly in Switzerland. And they measure precipitation and temperature, and some of them measure air pollution, and some of them measure noise. And the idea was to build a network to measure city climate. In a public-private partnership, we got that done. So public sector is with it, private sector is, science is in it, and we're like coordinating all of it. What you see in the background is the live, like the forecast. It's free, it's online. You can click on all these little buttons and it shows you the sensor, where it is with a photo. You can have a forecast, you have a history of the climate, you see which part of the city is hotter. Heat islands, we talked about that. In order to deal with these heat island problems, we need to rebuild cities. We have to like open, for example, closed routes, like blocked routes with buildings, because the wind from the countryside is not coming in anymore. So the cooling effect is gone. Somebody put a house in the way because nobody thought about it. Streets, black streets, or tarred places. We open them up and put trees on it. And we want to measure with this network, does it make a difference? Do the trees instead of the tar change the climate around the place? And it does, actually. Smart living, yeah, you know that. Alexa, So we're all paranoid about the data, but it's so comfortable to talk to the machine that listens in our bedroom. What these small sensors and discrete cameras and intelligent smoke alarms and voice-activated speakers do is they can make home safer and livable for elder people for much longer, because you can monitor yourself. You get help by tech. You can stay at home for longer. And that's an important social aspect. So it is definitely useful. We have to deal with the data protection stuff a bit. We're almost done. Do you want the buzzword analysis? We just quickly go through it. One thing, of course, is the tech buzzwords, like big data. What is that? Well, it's actually these huge data sets that nobody can make sense of, but algorithms and tech now can. Sensors, it's actually a device that, well, a module, a device that detects events or changes in its environment and sends the information to another device. That's what a sensor basically is. And they get cheaper and more efficient and way more powerful, and they can measure almost everything by now. I mean, your phone there, like, I don't know how many sensors. How high am I? How warm is it? How fast do I move? All that stuff. When you turn around your monitor, it realizes you turned the monitor. That's a sensor. ICT, you know that, Internet and Communication Technology. The IoT thing, that's Internet of Things. That's actually devices talking to each other, basically. AI, of course, the artificial intelligence part, machine learning, deep learning, a system that perceives its environment and takes actions that maximize its chance of achieving change. So the idea is to have a learning machine, analyzing stuff and then adapting what the machine was basically told to do and become smarter at it. 5G, that's the network. Automation, that's basically losing most of our jobs, of course, to robots. I just found, like, an AI, they read 10% of the published internet, they fed that into their model, and now you can click a button, tell the machine what to do, click a button, and it writes a perfectly printable text. Platforms, buzzword number one, everybody wants to have a platform. And then, well, blockchain. That's the crypto you didn't buy 10 years ago. Disruption, everybody wants to be Uber now. Agility, adapting work methods, methodologies. Collaboration, participation, sustainability, and purpose. The real challenges that I see is less the technological challenges, is more the how. The what and the why, fine. Yeah, we're going to solve problems and it's going to be purposeful and we're going to feel better and hug each other. But how do we do it? The huge challenge is actually making us more efficient in working on these challenges. And methods and processes and the way we interact and stakeholder management, people talking to each other, the right people talking to each other at the right point in time. Communication and transparency. Traditionally, we still try to build stuff in our chamber and then put it out when it's ready and done and fantastic and get rich. But the problems are so gigantic and so complex. Nobody can solve them alone. It's just insane to try that. And that's why we have 400 platforms for the same solution. If people started talking to each other and be more open about, I can't do that on myself, but we're working on it, and throw resources together and talk to people, they're going to end up with a better product. And we need to learn that because we're really shit at it. Failure culture, everybody wants to be disruptive, but it has to be safe. How's that supposed to work? It's all experiment. It's all experimentation. It's trying out. And that includes, of course, failing. The problem is, if you want to include the public sector, for example, and the private sector, not everybody is really excited about it, because on the one side they're like, yeah, but it's taxpayers' money and the media is just waiting for us to burn money from the taxpayers. And the other side is, well, where's my ROI? I'm investing now and in 5 years I want to get the fucking money back, so what are we doing here? Of course, it's fine to have a business plan, that works, but we need to try out stuff and get better at failing. Do you know this wonderful Simon Beckett quote? Ever tried, ever failed, no matter, try again, fail better. I love that. Storytelling, I have to say that, better narratives. We need to include people. The digital gap by now is huge. Nobody understands it. It's way too complex. Even the guys programming, or the girls, sorry, ladies, programming the algorithms, the next day they're surprised what they do. So it's above our heads. Most people are completely disconnected from this world. And the way we talk about it is mostly technological. No, it's about making people understand what it has to do with their lives, how it helps them, which problems it creates. We need to educate ourselves and each other to get better at discussing this stuff, because it's intensely important that we do that. We need to be able to discuss this stuff. And storytelling, I think, can help. We all run on stories, religions, stories. I mean, not saying they're not true, I'm just saying it's stories. So we need to get better at that. And then realism, it's just we won't fix the world's problem in our bedroom probably. So if we want to stop ruining the planet and the habitat we're depending on, we should consider being a bit more open towards working with each other instead of against each other. So I'm not against capitalism. I think it should open up a bit and like see chances in early collaboration. All right, to wrap it up, cities can be smart if they use data and tech wisely to enhance the quality of life of their inhabitants in a sustainable way. Well, that's a mantra. You can repeat it to yourself or not. I'd love to end on 3 calls to action. So please engage. If you're good at something in this sector, think about how you can use your capabilities to create the change we need. We need to invest ourselves into it. Enjoy life, have fun, but don't ignore the fact that we're in a crisis. Switzerland is fantastic to be in a crisis. This is going to change, and so we need clever solutions and clever people who care about them. Educate is, well, involve others, help them. If you can translate your technological wisdom into words that people understand, then the digital gap is not helping democracy, for example. Soft skills become more and more important because automation, well, the robots, remember that. The human capability is way more important than being as good as a machine almost. And then invest. If you have money to give away and invest in projects, please choose wisely where you invest them in. We need to relearn calculating because all the externalized problems we are creating by short-sighted investments brought us where we are today, and we need to change that. Symbols, yeah, but maybe not avoidable human demise. That's it. Thanks.